Hello and welcome back to another episode of Taking Back Saturday, a Happy Buyers Club podcast where we break down the real estate market each and every Friday and help home buyers build confidence, follow a process, and hopefully buy really well. I'm your host, Chayse Jones, and joining me, as he does every week, my mate, Sam Hunter. How are you, Sam?
I'm well, mate. New merch day.
Hey, for those that are watching on YouTube or seeing the clips, it is new merch day.
It's new merch day. We're testing out our hoodies. Changing weather, even though it doesn't feel like a Brisbane winter because it's raining so much. It's hoodie season.
I hope that the youths out there, the first home buyers, are loving the colours. They're ready to pop.
Exactly right.
Okay, real estate. I mean, it's not all fancy merch and open homes and champagne. Sometimes it's really boring processes that are really, really important. Today we're going to talk due diligence, which is definitely a tongue twister that one of us is going to slip up on. Due diligence throughout today. But why don't we start from the top? What is due diligence?
I think even before we get to what due dil, and I'm going to say that just so I don't trip myself up. Yeah, I'm a mumbler by trade. So any tongue twisters are going to get me into trouble. I think your point of real estate is not all glamour and open homes can't really be understated. The more boring your process or the more boring your home search, chances are the faster and better you will end up buying. Buying a house is just a process. It is something like when we're buying a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom unit for a client all the way up to buying a family home, for a few $1 million. It's the same process that we follow, and we try and be as meticulous as possible. So that we can put ourselves in a position to act when something ticks all the due dil, but also feels right. Yeah. So coming back to your question of what is due diligence, we talked about on a previous episode of this show that what you see on realestate.com is the best of the best. So it's a highly curated carousel of photography. It is very, hopefully, carefully chosen words, hopefully a very carefully chosen pricing strategy, whether that's an auction or price by negotiation or an offer's over, all designed to capture attention and ideally generate emotion. What isn't present on realestate.com is the boring stuff, the things that potentially you need to understand before you even make a decision to send an inquiry to that real estate agent. So due diligence is what realestate.com.au or any other property portal or what a real estate agent is not making obvious when they list a home for sale. So flood searches, easement checks, actually confirming the plot boundaries, through to comparable sales.
It's everything. It's your research. It's
correct.
When we talk homework, I know we've spoken plenty of times about homework, and that's a very broad term because it involves, the questions that we ask a real estate agent, but it's also the research, the stuff that you can't see, that stuff you're running through right there. And the more efficient that you can be in this process, which, it can be monotonous, it can be repetitive. But the idea is that by being efficient, you are going to be wasting less time and you're going to be viewing properties that are more appropriate when you actually come to inspecting those properties. So this is stuff that you should be doing. We should start doing well ahead of time before you even send that inquiry.
Absolutely. I mean, we're recording this on a Tuesday morning. Tuesday is the sort of, I guess what you want to call like biggest outreach day of our week for our potential clients, where we're speaking to, I think this morning we would have sent really refined briefs to more than 1,500 real estate agents. And we're recording this at 9:30 in the morning. There's probably 100 replies that have come back to you with any number of properties on, pre or off market for us to consider for the various clients that we're working on. People think that being a buyer's agent is this like glamorous job of you drive around, you're looking at houses, you're kind of looking through, being like, oh, this is really nice. Let's make an offer. See how we go. We spend more time looking at a computer screen doing digital due diligence than we would anything else.
That's the tongue twister.
That is the tongue twister, triple D. And it's that sets us up for not wasting time, energy, petrol, our clients' time, energy, and petrol by going and seeing the wrong stuff. Out of those 100 addresses, there'd be less than 10, do you reckon, that we will actually go and have a look at that fit the needs and fit the risk profile or the willingness to compromise that our clients are looking for, rather than just being, oh, it's the right number of bedrooms in a suburb nearby. You guys should definitely look at this because it's what I have the opportunity to sell.
And you're like, it is a grind, and I love that word that you picked out right there, and that was risk. And risk reduction is one of the most important roles that we serve for our clients, but it's something that you as a buyer should be serving for yourself. Risk reduction is incredibly important. Obviously, in the short term, saving time, not looking at properties that are inappropriate, but obviously further down the line, like some of the stuff that we're going to talk about and how you can do this research ahead of time is about managing risk well into the future of your asset that you're going to be spending a lot of money to secure.
And I think the way, again, we're going to sort of delve into a little bit about how we operate here behind the scenes, because it works, I guess, for us, and it would work for our clients, which is a nice thing to be. It helps if you get in a flow for whose roles there are along this process. So if most people who are listening to this show and are buying out there are buying in a partnership, let's call it that. So split up those roles. It's like a family unit. If one person does everything, that person goes insane. You've got to have roles and responsibilities. It's like, I don't know if you guys have it, but on my fridge at home, there's a chore list. I know what I'm doing. My wife knows what she's doing. And most of the time she's reminding me that I've forgotten to do whatever it is that I'm supposed to be doing. It's a bit like that in property. So the way that we operate, a lot of this first up due deal is actually done by Chayse. Thankfully. I say that with a mountain of gratitude. So I'm going to ask you the question. If, looking at your inbox this morning, there's a lot of replies. There's a lot of shit for you to sift through, right? How do you do your due diligence?
Easy. Well, it's not easy. It is easy once you've done it 1,000 times over. But it starts with really simple tasks like checking where it is on the map. First thing I do every single time, bang, straight onto the Google Maps, looking down at the street view, the satellite view, and like what it looks like in person, sort of to determine, is this on a main road? Is it across the road from a cemetery? Is there a fish factory out the back?
Have they greened the grass in the photos?
Is there an enormous unit complex next door that you probably couldn't quite see in the way that they cut the photos? You're trying to just uncover things that are sort of outside the lens that's been curated on realestate.com.au. I run a Develo report on every single property of interest. A Develo report gives you a full risk profile of, is there an easement on the block? Is there a flood risk or overland flow risk? Are there protected trees on the block? Are there noise considerations from, again, main roads, train lines, airplane flight paths? Are there any services through the block? Stormwater, sewer pipes, which are going to affect things like putting a potential pool in down the line. So a Develo report it makes it easy. It certainly is. It's a matter of entering an address, but doing it every single time and ensuring that you have that and tick those boxes each and every time, that's an extremely important part of our process. We've also got some gated market data that we use through RP data, through CoreLogic, and that gives us information about when it was built, what it's zoned for. We check the aspect, we check the boundaries, we check the frontage, what it last sold for, what its estimated market value is. There's lots of stuff that we can find out about the seller through that process as well, what their situation might be. These are all things that we're doing before we even contact the agent again to ask some follow-up questions. So that's the surface level stuff. I'm creating a note for every single property, and I'm going through and making sure that each one of those pieces of information are there. Even if they're not, no stand out or alarm bells ring, it's there, and I'm going to keep record of it because I'm going to be going on to the next property soon enough.
I think the important part about doing this, again, before you send an inquiry and certainly before you go and have a look at a property, if it does tick enough boxes for you, is if you know what is effectively black and white and you ask questions surrounding it, it's always good asking questions where you kind of know the answers already because you get a sense for whether there's any bullshit going on from the other side or not. If you don't know that and you ask the questions, you take the answers you get as gospel, right? So it gives you a really good understanding of the agent that is facilitating that sale, how much you may be able to rely on the information that you are or aren't getting from them throughout the process, which is going to come in really handy if you decide it is the one for you and you want to make an offer, or you're getting information back from them about how many other people are interested, how many bidders there may be at an auction, etc. Some of the other ways that we rely on doing our own due deal, and this is again coming back to how important it is to have a good team around you, is we speak to solicitors as early in the process as we can. We've got a handful that we work really closely with. We'll get them to do a contract review. So ideally, even before we've seen it on open home, if we've done all this and it's passed what we need it to pass, we talk to the agent, we confirm, can we see it ahead of time? Can you send us a blank copy of the contract? There's information on contract that will raise a red flag or it won't, and we'll have a look at it. And more than 9 out of 10 contracts in Brisbane, if you're listening to this in Brisbane and pretty much anywhere else in Australia, are going to be very standard. We still always get them reviewed by a solicitor. More often than not, we'll get an email back that's like, yeah, it's fine. But you do see the occasional red flag where there's a special condition entered that doesn't quite make sense, or they don't have smoke alarm compliance, or they're taking all the window furnishing and they're unplumbing the fridge and they're taking the dishwasher with them, and all that stuff's in the contract. If you don't look at that before you've made an offer, it can be really easy to overlook once the emotions get heightened. So solicitors for us play a really big role in our due deal. They're also a really good avenue if you're buying a unit to get a body corporate search in advance. And I think we've talked about this on the pod before, but a disclosure statement that you sort of get from an agent at an open home, or they'll send you an email, versus the full body corporate search are very different things.
100%.
Disclosure is going to tell you what it's going to cost you. It's not going to tell you where those costs really go, what they've paid for in the past, what they may have to pay for in the future, and how well run that complex is. So as part of your due deal, call the agent and be like, have you got the most recent minutes of an AGM? All good agents selling a unit in a body corporate scheme will have at least had that conversation with the seller, and ideally will have got it. And if they can provide that to you, it's just an extra layer of confidence that you'll have ahead of making an offer. If they don't, try and get it before you make your offer. Absolute worst case, put a clause in there that says, hey, this is actually subject to a full body corporate search, a satisfactory full body corporate search. And any good lawyer will tell you to do the same thing.
And what are you looking for in one of those?
No, nothing dumb is the way that I would describe it. So
healthy body corporate committee.
A healthy committee where if work needed to be done, everyone agreed to get 3 quotes and they picked the best quote, not necessarily the cheapest quote. That money is being spent in a really transparent way. That things like regular pest inspections and regular treatments every few years are being undertaken. All the kind of basics that you would expect to do in your own home if it was yours, that should be run by a committee. You should also be looking, if you've been looking for a unit for a long time, you'll get a real sense for what fair value is with body corporate rates as well. So if you're looking in like that traditional 2-bed, 1-bath, 76-pack and the body corporate's 10 grand a year, why? Yeah, ask, and it's just ask why. Versus if it's $1,500 a year only, that'd also freak me out because that's not enough probably to pay for insurance of the building. So the full search and getting a copy of those AGM minutes are going to give you a hell of a lot more confidence as to what's really going on, how well it's run, how well it's administered, how well just the typical maintenance stuff is taken care of every year, versus a disclosure statement where you're like, oh, cool, it's only $3,500 a year. Yep, let's definitely just do this. It's cheap.
Another member of the team, and a really important member of any good buying team, is a building and pest inspector.
Mm-hmm.
Now, asking the agent as part of your questioning when you do contacting them after inquiry is, has a building and pest inspection been performed? Am I able to see a copy of that report ahead of time? If the answer is no, that's on you then to arrange those building and pest inspections to take place. Again, a really important step to uncover any surprises. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We don't want any surprises right up until the day you move in, and 2 years down the track. If there's no surprises that are happening during that time, mission accomplished.
I had a coffee with a guy this morning and he said, my favorite radio song is No Alarms, No Surprises. And I was like, man, that is a rule for real estate.
Nice. And that's the thing, like, I say no surprises, but I mean that in a serious way. That
100%.
Like, surprises are often expensive, and that's it. But by taking on risks that you don't know about, you're potentially adding costs that, outside of a very expensive purchase and fees and everything surrounding it, you don't want to be lumping out money in the short term or even long term to fix something that you could have known about well ahead of time. So,
exactly. I mean, we've had plenty of horror stories of people buying a house with a view to put a pool in. They're hot summers here. Every family wants a pool, regardless of whether it's a money pit or otherwise. And I have my own opinions on pools. But you finally buy the house and then you go, we're going to put the pool there. And the pool builder comes out and they're like, you can't put the pool there. There's a sewer pipe underneath. Why did no one tell you that? So just knowing little things like that is it's going to mitigate your risk and ideally will mitigate any unforeseen surprise costs ongoing. The other reason why we take, I guess, our due diligence so seriously is most people, while they have every intention of being in a home for 30 to 40, 50 years, even longer, there's every chance that they may need to sell it, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Circumstances change, families change. There are any number of events that cause people to want to move house or to need to move home. If you don't do your due diligence up front and you don't uncover things that potentially may have caused you to object, then as and when you find yourself in a scenario of wanting to move on or needing to move on, you're limiting your buyer pool. And we always look for property that has as few objections as possible, so that if you do need to move it on, you've got the opportunity to have the most number of active, motivated, ideally emotional buyers at your disposal at that time, so that you're making as much as possible and your move is as easy as possible. If you're buying a house in a flood zone and you didn't know about it, if you're buying a house with a sewer pipe running straight underneath the backyard where someone might want to put a pool in, if you're buying into a body corporate where it's poorly run and there's a lot of money going to an admin fund and they're not doing anything to administer it, and there hasn't really been a solid AGM for the last 2 years and no one can agree on everything, it's an objection. And it's a really easy objection for 80% of the market to just go, there'll be something else, don't worry about it.
Yeah, for those that do follow the process, when it's their turn to buy, they're the ones that are going to uncover it, and you're the one who's going to be like, oh, man, I wish I had been there.
Exactly. It's similar. You mentioned before buying a nice house that's right next to a rundown unit block or something like that. Now, I got no problem with urban living, and I would actually have no objection buying a house next to a unit block if it was in the right spot and didn't tick it did tick those. It's not near a train line, it's not near a bus line, it's not the main road, it doesn't have any flooding, right? That to me is still a relatively A-class asset. But if you buy the wrong ones of those, you buy something in a flood zone, you buy something that's backing onto a train line. We had a conversation with a client last week. She was like, wow, this was cheap, we should have bought it. And I was like, it backs onto a train line, there's 3 coal trains every single day, and it's like as wet as anything.
The house would rumble 3 times a day.
Yeah. To the point where it just had almost every objection under the sun. Yes, you could buy it cheap. Like comparable houses in that suburb 300 meters away are selling for 30% more than this place. So yeah, you could buy it cheap, but there's a lot of objections that come with it. And when the rest of that market grows and doubles over 10 years, you're potentially only looking at something like a 70% gain, even if you've bought it less. So yeah, we would always advise buying well. That doesn't necessarily mean buying cheap.
Yeah, nice one. A lot of practical tips in there today. Have you got anything on the top to see us out for this podcast? Any tips for the weekend?
I'm just going to give another shout out to our friends at Develo. If you're not seeing a Develo report on anything that you're looking at, go and ask why and get your hands on one, because they just make all of this due diligence super easy.
Nice one. And I know I should have covered this off earlier when I talked about shared notes. My tip for the weekend is definitely create a shared note with you and your buying partner. Every single property, every single note in the one place, including all the info that we said to go and uncover, as well as what questions you're going to ask when you do contact the agent. It makes it so much easier. No one out there needs to be a super genius that remembers everything about every property. Write it all down, keep it safe, share it with your buying partner.